Gary Jules, Gary Hooper, Gary Duncan, Gary Clark. Moore 103 of 214, the best wide receivers of all time. 162 of 322 people who should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 13 of 115, the greatest Washington Redskins of all time. Gary Chalk, Gary Berghoff. Moore Gary Berghoff 842 of 1017, the best actors in film history. 82 of 115, the best short actors. 235 of 461, the best TV actors of all time. Gary Suter. Moore Gary Suter 47 of 116, the best defenseman in NHL history. 29 of 64, the greatest American hockey players of all time. 125 of 135, the greatest Chicago Blackhawks of all time. Gary Snyder. Moore Gary Snyder 40 of 118, the best American poets. 186 of 209, the greatest living writers and most famous authors today. 64 of 168, the best poets of the 20th century. Gary Morris. Moore Gary Morris 186 of 215, the greatest classic country and Western artists of all time. 35 of 51 celebrities who were in National Honor Society. Gary Husband. Moore Gary Husband 405 of 532, the best drummers of all time. 89 of 226, famous jazz drummers. Gary Daniels. Moore Gary Daniels 68 of 235, the all-time greatest martial arts actors. 27 of 28 celebrities who are black belts. Gary Lewis. Moore Gary Lewis 5 of 31, the best Scottish actors working today. 15 of 61. The best Scottish actors of all time. 34 of 50 male celebrities who are 5'. Gary Kubiak. Moore Gary Kubiak 391 of 1323, the best football players ever. 48 of 61. The best NFL coaches of all time. 1 of 4, the best Houston Texans head coaches of all time. Gary Cherone. Gary Bettman. Gary Lewis and the Playboys. Moore Gary Lewis and the Playboys 471 of 1728, the best rock bands of all time. 607 of 1891, the greatest musical artists of all time. 64 of 219, the top pop artists of the 1960s. Gary Patterson. Moore Gary Patterson 33 of 133, the best college football coaches of all time. 14 of 64, the best current college football coaches. 22 of 49, the most high-strung coaches in college sports. Gary Medel. Gary Geety. Moore Gary Geety 245 of 511, the best baseball players not in the Hall of Fame. 293 of 708, the best hitters In baseball history, 34 of 120, the greatest third baseman of all time. Gary Dowarden. More Gary Dowarden, 93 of 191. The greatest black actors in film history, 28 of 64. The most handsome black actors today, 4 of 6 TV actors whose addictions affected storylines. Gary Harris. More Gary Harris, 472 of 786. The top NBA players of all time, 104 of 175. The greatest shooting guards in NBA history, 55 of 96. The most overrated players in the NBA today. Gary Fensick. Or 28 of 144. The greatest Chicago Bears of all time, 200 of 432. The greatest defenders in NFL history. Gary Allen. More Gary Allen, 50 of 74. Mormon celebrities, 146 of 291. The top country artists of all time, 141. 186. The best male country singers of all time. Gary Delabate. More Gary Delabate, 42 of 46. The most irritating Howard Stern Show regulars, 3 of 38. The most essential Howard Stern Show cast members. Gary Cahill. More Gary Cahill, 772 of 1310. The best soccer players of all time, 316 of 452. The best soccer defenders of all time, 149 of 164. Who's the best player in the Premier League? Gary Time. More Gary Time, 119 of 186. The all-time best rock bassists, 38 of 74. The best rock bass player of the 1970s. Gary Roberts. More Gary Roberts, 217 of 502. The best NHL players of all time, 52 of 75. People who should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, 40 of 93. The best Toronto Maple Leafs of all time. Gary Sheffield. More Gary Sheffield, 46 of 511. The best baseball players not in the Hall of Fame, 33 of 106. The best Atlanta Braves of all time, 110 of 708. The best hitters in baseball history. Gary Callister. Gary Johnson. More Gary Johnson, 80 of 107. Famous politicians you'd want to have a beer with, 10 of 205. Celebrities born on New Year's Day, 32 of 47. 40 plus politicians who smoked marijuana. Gary Zimmerman. More Gary Zimmerman, 194 of 1323. The best football players ever, 31 of 98. The best Oregon Ducks of all time, 24 of 135. The best Minnesota Vikings of all time. Gary Rossington. More Gary Rossington, 63, 639. The greatest lead guitarists of all time, 94 of 542. The greatest guitarists of all time, 28 of 74. The greatest rock guitarists of the 1970s. Gary Ridgway. More Gary Ridgway inside Gary Ridgway's childhood. 99 of 130 famous American serial killers. 14 of 61 the scariest serial killers in history. Gary Player. More Gary Player. 12 of 162 the best golfers of all time. 20 of 27 old athletes you didn't realize are still alive. 4 of 30 who has the best short game in golf history. Gary Barlow. More Gary Barlow. 23 of 79 the best reality show judges. 117 of 178 the best solo artists who used to front a band. 120 of 255 the best ballad bands/artists. Gary Payton. More Gary Payton. 45 of 786 the top NBA players of all time. 42 of 133 the best Boston Celtics of all time. 32 of 107 the greatest Lakers of all time. Gary Payton. Gary Carter. More Gary Carter. 90 of 150 athletes you didn't know were conservative. 694 of 753 people we wish were still alive. 127 of 255 the best players in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Gary Clark Jr. More Gary Clark Jr. The best Gary Clark Jr. albums, ranked 90 of 225 the best blues artists of all time. Gary Neville. More Gary Neville. 36 of 452 the best soccer defenders of all time. 20 of 102 best Manchester United players of all time, ranked 66 of 200 the best soccer players from United Kingdom. Gary Lineker. More Gary Lineker. 96 of 1310 the best soccer players of all time. 699 of 1816 the best athletes of all time. 64 of 164 the best soccer players of the 90s. Gary Cooper. More Gary Cooper. 905 of 2443 the most influential people of all time. 23 of 163 the greatest Western movie stars. Gary Moore. More Gary Moore. The best Gary Moore albums of all time. 213 of 739 the best singers of all time. 383 of 1728 the best rock bands of all time. Gary Glitter. Gary Newman. More Gary Newman. The best Gary Newman albums of all time. 282 of 603 the best rock vocalists. 212 of 298 the best frontmen in rock. Gary Sinise. More Gary Sinise. The best Gary Sinise movies. 23 of 269 the most trustworthy celebrities in the world. 858 of 904 Celebrity Death Pool 2021. Gary Cole. More Gary Cole. 8 of 23 actors who are the best at playing sleazeballs. 15 of 15 celebrities with autistic children. 46 of 56 the best Law and Order SVU guest stars. Gary Coleman. More Gary Coleman. 156 of 191 the greatest child stars who are still acting 64 of 115, the best short actors 376 of 461, the best TV actors of all time. Gary Oldman. More Gary Oldman behind-the-scenes stories about working with Gary Oldman. 30 of 264, the best male actors working today. 24 of 1017, the best actors in film history. Gary Busey. More Gary Busey. The 13 most insane things Gary Busey has ever done. Gary Busey and Ted Haggard once swapped wives, and it was more bizarre than you can possibly imagine. 287 of 310, the coolest actors ever.
Hey guys, thank you so much for the support and likes and comments down below, and also thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to see you in the next video. Then take care. Bye!